Good evening. Welcome to Left, Right and Centre. I'm Vishnu Shom. On the program this evening, the Trump administration has notified US Congress of a $686 million upgrade package for Pakistan's F-16 fleet, including 92 state-of-the-art Link 16 tactical data link systems. I'll explain all of this. Advanced avionics, cryptographic modules, and comprehensive training and logistics support. Now, this jam-resistant secure network, which is the backbone, incidentally, of NATO operations, enables real-time sharing of radar tracks, targeting data, imagery, and threats across air, ground, sea, and allied forces. It dramatically boosts the situational awareness, coordinated strikes, and seamless interoperability with US and partner militaries. In simple terms, this is serious capability that the US is now willing to sell Pakistan for them to upgrade the mainstay of their Air Force, the F-16 aircraft, which they inducted from the early 80s onwards. Once this technology is inducted, it's clear it will be directed at India, contrary to what is widely stated that Pakistan needs F-16 in the fight against terror, which is clearly not the case. This will be directed at India, and the upgrades extend the jet's life to 2040, so a huge headache for India. The timing underscores President Trump's close partnership with Pakistan's Army Chief, Field Marshal Asim Munir, featuring unprecedented White House meetings in June and September, where they discussed security and de-escalation efforts. But this is a real romance which is there between Munir and Trump at a juncture when Pakistan and America are closer than they've been in the recent past. I'm joined now by Air Marshal Sanjeev Kapoor, Daniel Block and Shishir Priyadashi. I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. Air Marshal Kapoor, let me come to you first. Whenever we talk about fighter aircraft, the assumption very often is that you need weapons to make a fighter jet more advanced. In this case, I would suggest that the ability to share data through data links of a very high standard incrementally enhances the capabilities of Pakistan's F-16 fleet. Is that right?
Absolutely. Good evening to you and fellow panelists and your viewers. The recent Op Sindoor I covered on your program, Vishnu, has thrown up a lot of lessons for our adversaries, both in the north and in the west. They would like to see where they faltered, and what you just covered is the capability enhancement is what they lacked, the western adversary. So they have learned the lesson fast. And the bonhomie which Donald Trump and Asim Munir share personal bonding too is coming to fore, wherein the 4 visits in quick succession and meetings between these two has made the 686 million package, which is not easy to get through to Congress, find a pace which is breathtaking. Now, each element today of warfare is not spoken. Unlike the olden days where we used to communicate with the ground radar, the radars used to guide us, the software-defined radios, and the complete data transfer today is defining the warfare. The ISCCS was our backbone, which they want to counter
now. The Integrated Air Command and Control System.
The Integrated Air Command and Control Center of the IAF, which was integrated with our weapons and sensors, sensor to shooter, things was integrated with artificial intelligence. So this part they want to replicate in some way by enhancing the capabilities which you just mentioned. That's my take.
But Air Marshal, in simple terms for our viewers, this represents a headache to the Indian Air Force, right? Pure and simple.
Yes, it is. But we are to be ahead of the curve always in warfare. No two wars are fought with the same, lessons. Only the lessons are kept in mind. And every war, every conflict is different. Okay. So the next conflict, as and when it happens, will be totally different.
All right.
And both the adversaries are now working towards it, how to be ahead of us in this curve. And we have to be aware of that.
Daniel Block, Pakistan has a fairly storied history with the F-16 aircraft. It's been their mainstay for a while, but then there was the Pressler Amendment for several years. They couldn't get the aircraft. Then the US started giving it to them. I remember during the Kargil War of 1999, they had F-16 jets, but they didn't have beyond visual range missiles. That all started changing in 2006 when they started getting the AMRAAM missile. The platform they presently have is very advanced. with these upgrades, it becomes even more advanced. Does this come at a time when Pakistan is perhaps closer to America than it's been in years?
Yeah, I mean, the simple answer is yes. And I think that Pakistan requested these jets. I could be mistaken about this, but I believe that it put out a request for these jets in either 2021 or 2022. And I'm pretty sure it was 2021. And the United States, I think, sat on it a while, in part because the United States didn't want to antagonize India. And again, we haven't heard the White House say explicitly that this is anything to do with deteriorating relations with India or with warming relations with Pakistan or with some combination thereof. But I think it's hard to look at the timing of this and not view it as coming in that context in terms of better relations with Pakistan and the flip side of that, deteriorating relations with India. Now, I believe Congress has 30 days in which it could block the sale of this if it wanted to. I'm not exactly positive on how the mechanism there works, but I think there's about 30 days where Congress has an opportunity to review the sale. So I don't think we've necessarily heard the last word on this, but it's certainly, I would imagine that the sale is going to go through. And I think, again, to what you said, this does come in the context of better relations forming between the United States and Pakistan.
Air Marshal Kapoor, just again from a technology standpoint, we're talking about data links over here, the ability to transfer encrypted data from aircraft to aircraft, which is the big force multiplier. Does India have anything comparable to a Link 16 system?
We are working on that. We are in touch with our own engineers, scientists, taking help from foreign companies. I would leave it at that, but we are working on that.
Daniel, one of the points that govern the use of the F-16 by and large for Pakistan is that it's used for anti-terror operations. The US finds comfort in that definition, but there's a great deal of hypocrisy in it because you don't fight terrorists with, for example, AMRAAM missiles. All of Pakistan's F-16s are AMRAAM missile capable, and they've acquired at one stage more than 700 of these. I'm just curious to understand what you thought about this, that the F-16 is not really a platform you target terrorists with. It's an offensive platform. It's primarily meant against India.
I want to lead off by saying that I'm not enough of an expert on the technical uses of the F-16 and its purposes to comment with great authority on this. My understanding, though, is that the United States at least did use F-16s during some of its operations in Afghanistan against insurgents. I would assume that even though it's a very powerful weapon system, it does have some use in operations against terrorists. And I believe that Pakistan and Afghanistan have had deteriorating relations as of late. Again, I can't say with certainty. I do think that if Pakistan were to use these F-16s against India in a military operation, that would certainly be a large controversy in the United States. I can't say whether or not the Trump administration would be okay with that. I would think not, but Trump has certainly greenlit and been acceptable with all sorts of things in America's relationships with other countries that we never thought any U.S. president would be acceptable with. So I can't rule it out. I do think that if Pakistan, again, were to use these F-16s against India in a military operation, you would certainly see widespread outrage within Congress. Again, that might not stop the Trump administration, though. I mean, like I said, this is an administration that's
just a couple of years back during the Balakot operation, 2019, during the entire Balakot, or the events the day after Balakot. Be that as it may, Shishir Priyadarshi joins us as well. Mr. Priyadarshi, let's face it, India-US ties aren't quite where they were even a year back. On the other hand, you've got top American generals speaking about how Pakistan is a very useful ally for them. Where does that leave the broader strategic alignment of India, of New Delhi and Washington? I think you're on mute. Can you unmute yourself?
Apologies. Thank you, Vishnu. Vishnu, I think Delhi has realized that they are in contact and negotiating with an American administration in Washington which I think does not care too much about the import of its decisions on any country, be it their transatlantic partners, the way, in the initial days of the Ukraine peace talks, they would ignore or perhaps even announce post facto deals to the European Union. In a similar way, I think, I do not think the US now really cares. What for me is perhaps worrying is two things. One is that the way that Pakistan is going to project this. Pakistan is going to project it, one, of its indispensability to the United States. It will also, and the timing, as I think was said, is perhaps for me a more worrying thing than the actual deal, because I think the actual deal was, in a way, of the possible upgradation, was part of what was signed in 2022, that it would be considered at this time. But coming as it does now, not only in the context of this bonhomie or bromance, as you put it, between them, it's also a fact that it's come at a time that the relationship with India seems to be at a very, very low.
Yeah, it does.
Where suddenly out of the blue, India's told you're dumping rice. We're not doing any such thing. There is no dumping at all. So it is that is worrying, and the fact that Pakistan will say that is possibly part of the United States' recently announced national security strategy, which puts a strong emphasis on counterterrorism. And I'll end with that because I think it was mentioned that the Congress has 30 days. But what little I've seen very quickly of what's been put up to the Congress, it's been really framed as an upgrade that would support counterterrorism and regional security objectives, and not as a transformative combat weapons.
No,
so
exactly. In fact, let me just bring in Air Marshal Kapoor on that. If you just look at the weaponry of Pakistan's F-16s, AMRAAM missiles, you don't use that to fight terrorists on the ground.
I wanted to say, before you said, in 2019 after Balakot, if you recall, it was on your channel and others, that the AMRAAM piece was brought in front of South Bloc and shown to the whole world in the press conference by the air headquarters reps there. And just see how things have been planned. In 2025, the TTP and ISIS Khorasan have been declared, terrorist organizations by the United States. So Pakistan has gone and made a ground there to say that we need these AMRAAMs to counter these targets, these threats. And America, as per the previous treaty, is bound to give them these weapons. And like covered, they will be used against us. So on one hand, you are upgrading all their real-time information, data link, mission planning software, giving them space, getting them all to upgrade that. The original proposal in 2021 was for midlife upgrade. Every platform goes through a midlife upgrade. But not only its midlife upgrade, it is fitted with the newest technology. And I was reading somewhere today that those 6 to 7 platforms which have been lost in Op Sindoor also could be, refurbished or replaced through their reserves. So that has not come out in open, though they have said that we are not giving them any new aeroplanes. But needless to say, 75 plus F-16s based out of Jacobabad and Sargodha with the best technology and AMRAAM missiles would be a headache for us in the coming days.
Okay.
So I leave it at that.
Daniel Block, is it your sense that the relationship strategically between India and the United States is essentially transactional at this stage? America welcomes India's purchase of American weapon systems, and technology, and that's fine, and that'll continue. But beyond that, strategically, Pakistan has its place in the world as far as America is concerned, and that's going to remain.
I think that we could perhaps even go a step further and say that under this administration, the United States' relationship with basically any country is increasingly simply transactional. That seems to be the framework through which Trump views the world. And it's, I think, why, in many ways, if you look at his closest partners, they're not countries in Europe. They're not necessarily Japan or South Korea. They're not Canada. They're not India. They're the Gulf countries. And that's because the Gulf countries are the countries that have been most willing to be very kind of nakedly transactional with the Trump administration. So yeah, I think that that's kind of the Trump administration's MO. It's to be transactional, and it sees a purpose in having a good relationship with Pakistan, and so it's happy to go that way.
Mr. Priyadarshy, the other point, of course, is who pays for all of this? Pakistan will need to pay. Or should I just suggest that it's the IMF which is going to end up paying, given the state of their economy?
You're literally paraphrasing an article I wrote just after Op Sindoor, which was the time that the IMF had sanctioned, a large amount of money. And that's exactly what I wrote, is that this money, no matter what is said, will get diverted. Now, Vishnu, for me, it is, I recall in another program we were talking about tariffs, and we were saying that the US is not hesitant to follow the principle of weaponization of dependency. And though that was in the context of tariffs, but this is clearly, weaponization of dependency through weapons. But another interesting point, Vishnu, perhaps worth considering by, as we go along, is what will China's reaction be? I try and always think, we've talked about US's reaction, India's reaction. And as I was thinking, I think, China might just be quietly pleased, but mildly irritated. China will be pleased because if India is having, many fronts to manage and perhaps more money on this front, sure, it pleases them. It also, to that extent, weakens what in China's view has always been an irritant, any kind of increase in bonhomie between India and the US. But at the same time, China could also be mildly irritated because the fact is that it lessens Pakistan's dependency on China or the entire kind of dependency they want. But the point that I want to really end with, and I think that that really we should keep in mind, is, do we have at the moment, India, does it have any great power to be able to influence the kind of decisions that the US is making? Not likely. So we just have to kind of address the outcomes rather than address the cause.
All right. Well, I'd like to thank you all very much for being with us. It's an intriguing development, quite out of the blue, but it does appear that $686 million of a serious upgrade for Pakistan's F-16 jets are just around the corner. I would suggest that this is going to go through. It makes this platform relevant for at least the next 14, 15 years. And that is an added headache to the Indian Air Force, which continues to face threats not just from China, but also from Pakistan. Thank you all very much for being with us.